How we doing, guys?
Jeff, it's Randy Peterson. How's Trevor's rehab gone, and what do you anticipate out of him this spring?
Yeah, so he's full go, back in the swing of things. Has really been full go training in the weight room and on the field since we came back from the bowl game. So he got relatively close by the bowl game, but we wanted to make sure that he was 100%. So he'll be doing everything this spring. He'll be back completely into the fold, and we're excited to add him back in.
Will he come back? Assuming he comes back the way he left, will he regain his starting spot? I don't know what your philosophy is on that.
Yeah, I think obviously he was a big loss at the beginning of the season. He was returning from American, and there was a lot of I feel like expectations for him going into last year. Now he does need to knock some rust off. It has been a while since he's been out with the full group, drilling and competing and doing some of those things. So we're going to bring him back slow. And I tell those guys all the time, it's a very fluid depth chart. Everybody has the opportunity to prove themselves, to earn trust, and to compete for playing time right now. So I don't think I'm really, emphasizing the depth chart as much as I am each one of our guys developing and continuing to get better.
Thank you.
Jeff, Travis Hines here. I'm just curious, when we talked to Matt earlier this month, I think it was, he talked about maybe limiting the contact in spring that worked out well after last year. And I'm just wondering, what does that mean for you guys as a group of what your spring looks like?
Yeah. I think our philosophy, especially going into this spring, is we really want to master the foundation of our offense. And for us up front, we have to continue to develop. And I think we're really going to spend a lot of time on our fundamentals and techniques within our base scheme. So we're going to take things slow, and we're going to be building on those concepts as we go. And I think as we get through the spring, we will be putting the pads on and getting into a little bit more contact. Who that is and how much they're getting, is probably going to be more so those guys that we're trying to evaluate, those young guys that, probably don't have the game video or the reps, the live reps, the collision reps in order to fully evaluate them at this point.
What is the dynamic for your group, given there are so many guys back, whether it's just the youth returning from last year or guys with that extra year?
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. In my mind, the way that I look at it is we have an incredible depth now. And it's something that we've worked really, really hard on since we've been here, because depth builds competition. And, the more competition you have in your room, the better guys are becoming. And I think, even for our young guys that probably had their sights set on a bunch of guys graduating and all of those things, that is going to be probably an interesting dynamic. Not so much this spring. I think for us, it's the entire group continuing to develop and move forward. But I don't see it as a challenge when we get to fall camp and when we start settling in for the season. We have a lot of guys in our room that are more than capable of going in and playing in football games for us right now. We haven't had that luxury in the past. So I'm excited that realistically we lost one guy off of our offensive line last year in Noah Jurgensen. And really from the rest of the group down, they're all returning. So for me, I think it's, getting as many guys game ready as we can. Guys being willing to, play multiple positions like we've had in the past. I'm still a firm believer in cross-training our guys. I'm not going to put a guy at left guard and leave him there. Our guys should be able to play multiple positions, and that's going to give them the ability to get on the field sooner too.
Hey, Coach, Bill with Cyclone Report. Just wondering, maybe some of the offensive linemen that we didn't get to see a whole lot of last season. What in that group of guys, or who are you most excited about from what you've seen so far, maybe in that next crop of guys?
Yeah. And with having minimal contact with them to this point, it would be hard for me to project probably where everyone's at. I know they've been working hard, and you look at their strength numbers, their weight numbers, and what they're doing nutritionally. I think a lot of guys, and really all the guys, are moving in a positive direction. Of that young crew that we haven't seen, obviously, we had the opportunity to see Daryl Simmons and Jake Remsburg play a lot of snaps for us last year. And both of those guys, I think, going into the season, we weren't anticipating that to be the case. So in a positive way, those guys showed what they're capable of doing, and we'll anticipate that they just continue to get better. But of that next tier, you talk guys like Jared Hufford, Rob Hudson, are guys that saw game action, and I thought did a really nice job in how they progressed through the season. And Grant Schreiber, you'd probably throw in that group as well. Of your redshirted guys, I would say I'm equally excited for all of those guys, to get going and to see where and what growth they made through the last season. That probably didn't show up, or certainly didn't show up in terms of game video, but things that we've evaluated off of practice film, and the guys Tyler Miller, Brady Peterson, Sam Rengert, Hayden Pauls, and Anthony Smith of our redshirt guys. I'm excited to watch those guys continue to grow and to get out there and continue competing.
Thanks.
Hey, Coach, this is Michael Swain from 24/7 Sports. You hit on this a second ago, but I'm curious how maybe the extra COVID year impacts your long-term plan for the offensive line room, and some of them could obviously, use that additional year.
Yeah. Again, I think, like you said, it's all new. So, you have Sean Foster returning as a 6-year senior. Your guys like Derek Swagger and Colin Newell will technically be 5th-year seniors this year, but have the ability to stay after next season if they deem. And I think for me, we're going to recruit off the numbers that we have right now, or the numbers that we have available, but you don't really know maybe what some of those guys, what moves they'll make after next season. And, I don't even think it's fair for me to ask them that question, because I think a lot of it will be determined on where they feel they're at, and really talking more Colin Newell and Derek Swagger and those guys. So I know we'll be losing at least one guy, to eligibility, but we could lose up to 3. So, in terms of recruiting numbers or whatever that is, we're going to recruit off of the numbers that we have in front of us, and we'll adjust from there accordingly. So we'll keep a ton of guys, or a group of guys, ready to go in terms of our recruiting board, and make sure that we're doing our due diligence that way. But especially in this profession, you always got to be ready to adjust.
And specifically with Jake Remsburg, how is he doing recovering from the injury? I know he didn't play in the bowl game.
Yeah. I think what they told me the other day, 4 weeks ahead of schedule right now. With his injury, it's for him to be progressing like he is, I think is really exciting. And he's been working really hard to get back. We'll still be training him from a fundamental standpoint. We won't do anything in regards with, where he's coming back from that injury, but he'll still be getting good work. He'll still be involved as much as we can, but fully project him to be back in the summer and be ready to go.
Hey, Coach, this is Matt Belenson from the Iowa State Daily. Just curious, when you looked back at that film from last year and you saw those younger guys step up into those bigger roles, just looking back on it now, how frankly kind of amazing it was to see those young guys frankly give Breece Hall a part of the season that he did. It seems like a lot of the highlight reels that we saw from Breece last year didn't seem like he had to really, fight through too much contact. The holes were, pretty much there for him from this young group.
Yeah, and Breece is special. I've been very fortunate to be around some really good running backs, from the time I was playing at Toledo to what we've been able to do here. And I think having a really, really good running back and a good group of tight ends makes running the football a lot easier on the offensive line. What I would say, and Breece probably makes some very difficult things look a little easier than some. But with the young guys that we were able to get production out of last year, I think it just shows the work that we've put in recruiting, the work that we've put in developing, because, in reality, we weren't expecting or anticipating that those guys were going to play at the capacity that they did last year. And it speaks to their development in the weight room, their development as a redshirt, freshman and not playing their first year. To be able to go in and play without any in-game experience, I think is really, really hard as a young guy. But for those guys to kind of take it in stride, I would probably give a lot of the credit to the leadership in our room. Sean Foster and Derek Swagger and Colin Newell, those guys were very aware of the situation and went above and beyond what they needed to do on a daily basis to make sure those young guys were taken care of, to make sure that they were helping them through this process and through kind of being thrown in the fire. But man, not to take any credit away from those two, with Daryl and with Jake, those guys, man, it makes the future of our program and really our offensive line room, man, it's really exciting that those young guys were able to go in and do that. And I also think that you really don't know what a guy's capable of until he's running with the ones. And there's a different level of communication. There's a different level of, even when you talk fitting into combination blocks, when you talk about space and protection and some of those things, when you're doing it with the top guys in the room, sometimes it makes it a little easier, for those guys to function when there's a different level of communication and some of those things. But man, moving forward, I tell our guys all the time, injuries happen and we can't plan for those. So we need to be ready for that. But that could have just easily been Jared Hufford or Rob Hudson. Rob Hudson was coming off an injury at that time when Daryl was plugged in to play at right guard. And it could have just as easily, we could be having this conversation about Grant Schreiber or Jared Hufford. The opportunity just probably wasn't as readily available for them like it was the other two. But really excited about really the whole group in general. But I think those young guys, going in and doing that, it speaks to our program as a whole.
Jeff, this is Randy again. In what ways, if any, did Trevor help mentor younger linemen? I can't imagine him, his sideline just hanging out and doing nothing.
Yeah, and that was really, injuries. Man, you knock on wood, you hope that they don't happen, and you certainly hope they don't happen to you. But when they do, I think the biggest thing that we did was challenge Trev, because he did have high expectations for himself going into last season, and I felt like he was ready to go, and he was ready to to be a leader for our team and for our offensive line, and for it to be cut short at the beginning of the year, like, man, that was a really hard thing for him. And the most important thing was like, hey, Trev, like, listen, we're going to take care and make sure that we're doing right by you first. And that's when really the decision for surgery happened. But for him, the challenge was, hey, like, I don't want this to turn into a Trev sits in the back and isn't paying attention type of setup. So, man, we had him involved in every way possible. On the field, he was out there coaching the guys. In the meetings, a lot of that was behind the scenes, when those guys would get together outside of our offensive line meetings. And he was able to bring those young guys along, as well as help some of the veteran guys that maybe didn't have as many game reps or as game play experience as he did. So Trev did a really good job of finding a silver lining, through a really tough deal. And, you could put some of those young guys' success in what they were going to do on Trev too. He really did help the group out and was a great leader through probably a really tough time in, his career.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah.
Hey, Coach, Ben Visser from the Cedar Rapids Gazette here. What have you seen from your guys with a full winter workout under their belt with Dave Andrews?
Yeah. I think really I could go all the way back to last January and before this COVID and all this stuff happened. You could see the differences almost immediately. And I think the one thing getting through last season that really stood out to me was how fresh our guys were in November. And yeah, injuries happen. And I know we always talk about that, but we weren't really dealing with as much game to game, with guys being banged up like we have in the past, just, an achy shoulder, an achy ankle, knee, et cetera. our guys were healthy. And, you know, with the position that we play, it's a violent position that, you know, our guys, they take a lot of blows. And, you know, part of it is my job to make sure that, you know, we're keeping them safe and not putting them in a ton of positions. But, you know, we wanted to make sure that we kept tread on the tire so that when we got to November, when we got to, you know, time to go compete for a championship, that we were able to play our best. And I feel like, you know, now you fast forward and they have had a full winter with Coach Andrews. You know, man, you talk about watching guys' bodies change. And a lot of that is due to what Coach Andrews and his staff is doing in the weight room. And then I would equally say what Coach Rachel's doing in terms of nutrition, you know, and helping our guys realize that it's not just about playing football on Saturdays, and it's not just about what you're doing in the weight room. You know, that there is a big picture to all of this, and you have to put all of these areas of your life together, and they have to be aligned. That you're not going to make the amount of gains that you want, whether it's losing body fat, adding lean mass, etc., whatever your goals are. Like, there is a level of nutrition, rest, recovery that are equally as important. So really for our guys, man, like, you see their bodies change, and, you know, even when you're talking to them, they feel different. They're moving differently. So from my end, you know, man, that gets me really excited, because it should be give us the ability to elevate our level of play.
All right, looks like that's all we have for you, Coach. Thanks for your time.
Okay, thanks, guys.